Cool.
All right.
Got it. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And as you do see on the agenda, there is a public comment section. And I don't believe we have anyone from the public that is going to make a comment. So this, for staff, so this is streaming on YouTube, right? But we can't tell if anyone's looking at it on YouTube?
I can. Whose channel is it on YouTube?
It's on our channel.
Yeah, can we see if anyone's on it, or is it just open?
I can log in. Give me a few minutes and I'll get back to you.
And the only reason was I'm scanning through the agenda. If someone is on YouTube and they want to participate in public comment, looks like there's two options. They can either send an email to comment@svswa.org. Again, that's comment@svswa.org, or you can dial in. And could you scroll to the dial-in numbers real quick, just so we can have that up? And if anyone is watching it on YouTube, that way they'll see the phone numbers. It's on the middle of page 2. So if anyone's watching it on YouTube, jot those phone numbers down, one of those phone numbers, as well as the meeting ID number, the passcode, and then what to do to raise your hand or mute and unmute yourself. So let's go ahead and leave it on there. And I'm assuming no comments have come in, is that right?
No, no comment.
No, there's only two people. There's only two people watching.
Which would be Brett.
And I'm one of them, right?
And then Rosie, which she's the one monitoring.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I hope you are all healthy and safe, and depending on where you are, not dealing with too much smoke or too much heat, or a combination thereof. We do have some good updates between Patrick and myself. We've got some good updates on some of the agenda items here. So looking forward to this meeting, and I'm hoping that this kind of, you'll see as we go through stuff, this will kind of, I use the word rejuvenate our process. We're kind of at a standstill for a little bit, God, with dealing with so much stuff, and including the passing of Mayor Gunter and the retirement of the city manager, Ray Corpus, that kind of delayed some stuff that Patrick, and staff were working on with the city of Salinas. So with that said, just going through the agenda here, the first item that we have is the minutes of our June 30th meeting. And the first item is if anyone on the committee has taken a look at those minutes and has any corrections they would like to submit. So I'll pause there. Does anyone on the committee have any corrections they'd like to see on the minutes? And
I was absent.
you broke up there for a second, Paula. Can you repeat that, please?
Oh yeah, I was just saying I didn't attend that meeting, so I have to abstain from making comments.
And by the way, there actually is no legal requirement surrounding abstaining on minutes for a meeting that you were not at. Both the Brown Act and the other pertinent items related to official meetings, they actually do state that if you were not at a meeting, you can still vote. Some members don't feel comfortable voting if they weren't there, but I just wanted to make mention of that.
Thank you.
All right, so I don't hear any corrections to the minutes. So if I could get a committee member to just say that they move approval.
I move approval.
And can I get a second, please?
Second. John Bailey.
And I'm going to do this in a different order. Does anyone want to vote no on the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Does anyone want to abstain from the minutes? Okay, then by default, the motion carries. So thank you all for that item. We're now going to this is a fun one for Patrick and for us, is the presentation run through of the annual report. So I'll turn over to Patrick, please.
So this could be very long, so I'm going to try to do it very quickly out of respect for everybody's time. And I'm certain everybody is just enthralled about watching the first presidential debate tonight at 6. So I'll entice you to, we'll move along quickly. So Erica, is you or Rosie going to be advancing?
It'll be Rosie.
Rosie, okay, great, thank you. All right, so just as a preface, you know, those of you that were on the Citizens Advisory Group before know that, you know, one of the things we really like to tout every year when we do our annual report is not just our employees, but also our customers, kids, all the things that we do. So you'll see a lot of photos. You know, we want to put that in there to show people that we are really reaching out and touching a lot of different lives in a lot of different ways. And so you'll see it in the front. Again, it's a cover page with, you know, a lot of photos, mostly of kids and tours and events that we participated in. Then the next page, we have our contact information, a little bit about where our facilities are, our offices, and just some general agency information that's right inside the cover, so you can get to it right away. Then the table of contents, I think that speaks for itself. And then the general manager message. Of course, you know, this year we're doing this annual report in memory of Mayor Gunter, who was a member on our board for many years and a big contributor to a lot of the things that our agency is dealing with right now. And, you know, one of the things I really wanted to focus and highlight on this year, obviously we had a couple of major capital improvements. Building a new landfill cell is always a major accomplishment and an undertaking for an agency. It requires a lot of permitting and staff work, and our organics processing facility. But really one of the big highlights I wanted to focus on this year is our continuing efforts to really run our agency, not like government, but more like business, and to really focus on the bottom line, not just cash flow and bringing money in, but you know, the liability that comes with landfills is significant. And we've spent a lot of effort with the board working on things to pay down liability, to set aside money for future liabilities, and to really just make the agency much more financially stable, and in turn, financially nimble when we run into something like a pandemic or a recession. So we just highlighted a number of activities and things that have gone on that we really are very proud of the work that we've done with the board. Again, a little background on what a joint powers agency is and who we are, mission, vision, and value statement. Most of you have all seen this before. Our board of directors, their normal schedules and who they are, what the different roles are. And then board highlights, which all of you get every month, something that Erica puts together, which is a compilation, sort of a Reader's Digest version of what happened at each board meeting. And this is a Reader's Digest version of the Reader's Digest version of the board highlights. So just the major things that the board dealt with in each of the meetings in the prior year. And then in honor of our employees, just some background of select employees, new employees, employees that received awards, just really people in action that are making everything we do run behind the scenes. That continues on, our accomplishments, our Employee of the Year, and some of our achievements and awards this year. Quick summary of our budget prior year, and then the recently approved budget for the current fiscal year, so you can get a little background on how our expenses are done and what the changes are year over year, and how that revenue comes in and how the revenue or how the expenditures are broken down into various operating categories. Capital improvements is again just a highlight of our major capital improvements this year. including acquisition of equipment and organics. As you all know, our business is very, very equipment intensive. And so it's not uncommon for us to spend well in excess of $1 million a year just in capital replacement. Then some basic statistics around the landfill, tonnage in, where it came from, a little background history, and going back to our financial sustainability discussion in the GM comments, you'll see, slow down just for a second. I just want to point out one thing. You'll see there's a little blue bar at the top of that landfill tonnage. And that's when we used to import garbage. And while that's a great idea in the short term, because it does generate revenue, and a large chunk of the money from that revenue still sits in reserve in our budget, but it's designated specifically for capital, because when you sell your landfill space, that's your most valuable asset. And when you sell it, it's like you're selling a piece of your capital. It's like you're selling a piece of your house. Well, you don't sell a piece of your house to pay your electric bill, but it's probably okay if you're selling your house, a piece of your house, so that you can do an add-on and make your house bigger, or buy something, you know, that's part of your operation, but not to use it for operation. So we did end that process in 2014. And as you can see, we have slowly grown and, you know, maintained a very financially sustainable operation using only the revenues we derive from our local residents. Okay.
Could we scroll up for just 1 second, please, to the pie graph? Patrick, am I reading that correctly in that 60% of the waste that goes, I'm sorry, it's Johnson. I thought that said Halone Road. I've got a window covering it. I was thinking that didn't make any sense, but if it's Johnson Canyon, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, all of our garbage goes to Johnson. Halone, the landfill part of Halone Road, is no longer operating. All right. So a little bit about our diversion programs. And again, these are just the diversion programs that operated by the landfill. They don't include the curbside recovery stuff that each of our garbage haulers are doing for us, and other community programs that are outside the landfill. This is just the landfill-based recovery programs. So you see a little breakdown of the things that we do each year. And then this is a very interesting graph, and it really is just a little bit about the operations. But if you look at the graph at the bottom of the page, you'll see the number of customer trips per year. You know, by Sun Street, by the Johnson Canyon landfill, and our Halone Road transfer station. You can see that each and every year over the last 5 years, we've had increasing customer base at all 3 of our operating facilities. That's been pretty consistent actually for the last 10 or 12 years, with the exception of a little dip during the recession. You know, it's a very popular facility, all of them. A lot of customer usage and a lot of trips each year. This first year, we exceeded 100,000 trips to the Sun Street transfer station in Salinas. Again, summary of some of our grants, both the organics grant, which we actually got a couple of years ago, but we're continuing to expend that, and some other ongoing grants around tire amnesty and mattress recycling and carpet recycling. So there's a lot of secondary money coming into the agency from Cal Recycle and other supporting agencies. I think most of you have seen this from a presentation at the last meeting. I won't spend a lot of time on it, other than the depackager is a major center point of our organics program, primarily because we are the lettuce bowl and we get a lot of packaged material in, and you can't compost it or recycle it until you get it out of the package. And a box cutter and a few people, that doesn't work very well. It takes a lot of slashes to empty thousands of individual bags. So this automates it. Our new compost facility, which I definitely would like to schedule a time, maybe when it's most appropriate for all of us to bring, have one of our meetings actually out at the landfill, so that the advisory committee can actually see it firsthand. But in the interim, if any of you are interested in a tour, just let Mandy or I know, and we'll be more than happy to take you out for an individual tour. But at some point in the near future, we will schedule something for the whole advisory committee. In Module 7, we talked about earlier, it's a new landfill expansion that's been completed. A little information on the left-hand column about all the different things that we actually accept at the landfill for diversion and recycling on top of garbage. And some nice aerial photos of what the bottom of a landfill looks like, because you only get to see it once. The next page is really just a summary of all of our marketing efforts, branding, television, TV campaigns, our Wally Waste Not programs, and just all the great work that Mandy and her staff does every day to get the message out about recycling and sustainable living. This is Jesse Sanchez School. They were one of our big award winners this year for really doing such a great job on sustainability within the school, saving the school money, and really the most important part about getting kids in schools involved in this is to have a leader at the school. And the principal was such a great leader on this program, and in actually spending time in the cafeteria, teaching kids about how to separate their food, and only, how to save things they weren't going to eat, how to separate things like milk and food waste, and really just it's a model program that we're going to be using them as an example for other schools all through our service area. And of course, we've got our community programs and some of the groups that we work with, like the Food Bank, O'Neill Sea Odyssey. We participated in the Trashin' Show in King City last year, as well as our Rock City Juggler, who, even in the times of COVID, continued to provide recycling entertainment for the kids with an educational component about how to recycle and what's important. And he did it electronically via Zoom or other types of platform meetings. Of course, tours, big thing that we love to do is to do tours of all of our facilities to show people what happens with your garbage. The most exciting thing or sad thing, depending on your perspective, is when we take kids on top of the landfill and I tell them, you're probably standing on something you threw away, and you're standing on over 150 feet of garbage. And that's sort of that's an interesting reaction you get sometimes when you say that to people, that you're likely standing on something you actually threw away. And then again, some additional work that Mandy's group does. I'll keep on going down, Rosie, please. Thanks. Waste assessments and recycling implementation. That's another big part of Mandy's resource recovery team and the work that they do out there with businesses, not just schools, but businesses and other organizations, to actually look at what's in their garbage, give them a work plan in terms of how can you recycle more, how can you reduce waste in your business or school, and just how to live and work more sustainably at home and at work. Wally Waste Not, another one of our great school programs. We talked about Jesse Sanchez, but also other schools out there are offered up to $1,500 check if they implement a whole series of recycling and sustainability activities in the school. I'm sorry, up to $2,000, excuse me. And so if they participate and they complete so many of these out of the laundry list of activities they can do, then we provide them an award at the end of the school year that they can use for really anything they want at their schools. But often they do use that money for enhancing sustainability efforts. Of course, here's the Bible of what drives everything that gets Mandy and I out of bed every morning. Really, these are the big bills. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of bills that drive what we do, but these are all the big ones. You've heard about most of these. You hear us talk about the Bible of regulations, which is 939, and then there's all the subsequent bills that came along that really continue to push the envelope and to drive our programs forward. And these are sort of just a quick summary of what those bills are. And then again, a little bit more on our recycling services that we have available, the types of programs, the materials we take, where we take them, extremely comprehensive, and that list grows every year. We'll be probably having to add another page next year. This includes household hazardous waste. This is our HHW team. They not only run a permanent operation at Sun Street that's open 6 days a week during the normal operating hours of the transfer station, but they also run remote collections in communities and at cleanup events. They also service our antifreeze, battery, oil, and paint program, which is really, the biggest chunk of what people get rid of as far as HHW. And so they service our facilities at Halone Road and Johnson Canyon as well. 1.5 million pounds of hazardous material were removed through that program, and that's saying a lot for people. So looking ahead a little bit, obviously the ongoing issue that we're working through, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in a later item, is the relocation of the Sun Street transfer station. But it's pretty clear that with over 100,000 service trips a year, and that doesn't even include all of the potential recycling trips where people just come in for recycling. That's, it's a popular and important service component for the city of Salinas. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's just an update, that continuing to work on that. You can see our service area. The area in orange is our service area. The area in white is Monterey Regional Waste Management District. They're about 800 square miles. We're 2,400 square miles. And you can see that, a lot of really intelligent thought went into the location of all these facilities many, many years ago. And they're strategically placed sort of geographically across the major population areas of our service. And then finally, just a little bit of feedback, some sample letters or email compliments that we've received from the public for the work we do. And of course, this is, you'll see we're having a socially distanced celebration for staff. We would normally in August go out and have a dinner with the employees. We call it our communications dinner, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get all of our employees together. They're spread out across the county. You have people that start very early in the morning and people that start later in the day and finish at the end of the day. And so we only have really one opportunity a year where we can get everybody together. We spend about an hour talking about current topics, handing out safety awards, longevity awards, and recognizing employee excellence and the employee of the year. So we did this. Unfortunately, we had to do it at the transfer station this year. As you can see, this is sort of all of us standing out behind the transfer station for a picture, and just sort of recognizing the hard work that people do. Okay, and finally, I think that was it. That was the last page.
That was the last page.
So I'll stop there. If anybody has questions or comments, something.
I have a comment. I just want to say, I want to recognize the team for the hard work. This is a great example of, really valuable content. It's visually interesting. I love all the pictures that you guys have included. I am going to take this and use this as an example for how companies can tell their story. And I just appreciate everything that you guys have included in this report. I think this is amazing. It's not boring in any means. So, there's a lot of reports that we look through, sustainability reports. You guys did a great job. That's all.
We've learned over the years about how important pictures are.
Well, you captured it. I mean, we learn a lot from pictures. So great job. You guys have done an amazing job. So
Well, thank you. And I guess
two
that goes without saying. The one thing I always seem to forget till the end, and this is all done in house. So I want to thank Adriana Escobar for the work that she did here. She's our administrative assistant in the front, and she's been doing this the last, I think, 3 or 4 years. And this is all this layout, all the editing, all the work. She does all the edit work, and then obviously all the different managers and supervisors and staff contribute to each of these respective pages. And the only thing that we don't do in-house is the printing. So it is a team effort, and it everybody loves to do this.
I'd really
That's
second
one of the
what
things I was
Nikki
gonna
had to
cue
say
you
as
up
well.
for. Go ahead, Paula.
I was just going to say, I'd like to second what Nikki had to say. It truly is amazing. And when you said it's all done in-house, that makes it doubly amazing. You have an amazing staff.
Yeah.
Truly.
Thank you.
bravo.
So Patrick, if people wanted to point people in the right direction to find the report or wanted to download it themselves, where should they go?
It will be on I don't know, Erica, has it been loaded up yet? It's usually on our homepage.
There is a link on our homepage, but it's not. It's under the annual report page, and we have all of our annual reports on our website. I can send the direct link to that page.
And we do have a limited number of hard copies we do print every year. So if anybody wants a hard copy, just let Erica or I know, and or Mandy, and we'll send one out to you also.
And I do want to see also, there may very well be other questions that other committee members have, because I know there's a lot of content on there. It is a really valuable document with a lot of good information. So we do have time. Is there any other questions or topics that you'd like to discuss a little bit related to what you saw in the report?
This is Grant. I don't have any questions on it. Just another comment that this is the 3rd or 4th year I've been on the committee. So 3rd or 4th year I've seen this annual report, and it really is one of the best annual reports I get to see. So again, kudos to the staff, and keep doing a great job.
Thank you.
I do have one comment. I think that there's a lot of produce companies within the industry, so recognizing some of their efforts, and I know that you guys collaborate with them, but schools, produce companies, I think would be well worth the recognition to get them engaged, involved, and then share their best practices with other companies to also duplicate the good efforts that they're making. But again, you guys have done a great job.
No, that's actually really good feedback. We always like to see if we can top what we did the year before, and that actually is really, really good to hear that. That's something we can definitely, because we do spend a lot of time working with ag, and
Yeah.
I think we do recognize a lot of ag companies during the course of the year. So thank you for that.
Yep.
All right, anyone else want to pipe in? If not, then we can go ahead and go to the next agenda item here. And it's the item 3, which is the opportunity for regional franchise procurement information. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, well, the reason this has come up, and this is a topic that we want to start discussing. And the reason we want to start discussing it is because all of the franchises, the garbage franchises for all 6 of our jurisdictions are now all co-terminating, meaning they're all ending on the exact same date. And that is not by accident, that is by design, because you only get this opportunity once every 8-10 years, where you can look at, is there a benefit or desire to look at more regionalization in how we deliver, how our garbage companies deliver service. And so today, the County Board of Supervisors extended waste management's agreement for the unincorporated county for 5 more years. Unfortunately, it comes with a 13.5% rate increase, but that's primarily for two reasons. One, the garbage company has to reinvest in new equipment because the agreement's 10 years old as of last June. And, they can't make the garbage equipment it gets heavy wear and tear. And keeping it alive for 10 years is quite a feat as it is. So one of the reasons that's why it's going up is that. And the second is bad debt. We're starting to see more and more of that discussed by our garbage companies, especially with COVID now. People aren't paying their bills, and the amount of bad debt. We heard today at the County Board of Supervisors, Waste Management's bad debt for the last fiscal year was over $1 million. That's not chump change. And so there's some adjustments being made, unfortunately. That is the reality of the business right now. But the good news is they extended their agreement only 5 years, and now it terminates at the same time as all 5 of our member cities. So today, right now, is the right time to talk about this. Not wait a year, not wait 6 months, because the process, if any of our member agencies, or all of them, or some of them, decide that they want to go out to competitive bid for services, starting that discussion 4.5, 5 years out is about perfect, because it's a very long process from starting the discussion to actually bidding a contract, awarding a contract, and then giving the winner adequate time to set up their operations prior to starting. So seems like a long time in front, but it's not at all. So I want to go through this. It's just sort of this is really informational background information for you. Our executive committee will see the same presentation on Thursday. And if there's a desire to move it forward for a broader discussion to the full board, we'll definitely be ready to do that. And this presentation was actually requested by the meeting of the city managers that I've been attending periodically. And this topic came up a couple of weeks ago at that meeting. We talked about it, and they asked that I prepare a presentation on the pros and cons and different options we have for looking at our franchise agreements between now and the time they expire on June 30th of 2025. So a little background, all the agreements are co-terminating. At the time these agreements terminate, they are all going to be 25 years, 25 years old or older, meaning that these are agreements and franchises that have been in place for a very long time, with the exception of the county, the last bid that we actually had in this county, or at least in our district, was the county contract that was done in 2010. And with the extension, their agreement will be 15 years old at the time they terminate. So when you look at old agreements, there's some pros and cons. The cons can be that the rates are really out of balance with market, because cost of living and the actual cost of the service may not go up at the same rate. There may have been special adjustments over the course of those 25 years that have driven rates in different directions. And so the longer your agreement goes without being competitively bid, the more likely is things are a little bit out of balance, and we'll see that in a second. So alignment of termination of agreements, it's like I said earlier, it's a one-time opportunity. We won't have this opportunity in 2 or 3 years. It'll be too late. And that's really some level of regionalization, and we'll go through the different options. Anything from a full regional agreement that where one contractor services all of our member agencies, down to regional groups of like our 3 central cities, Gonzales, Soledad, and Greenfield. They all collectively have one contract. So that's just an example of regionalization. Again, it corrects if there's out of balance circumstances in the rates. This gives you a chance to go back, check the market, and readjust. What is the market going to bid? Competition can be good. It can bring rates down. It can stabilize rates. Gives you a sense of what the real market rate is for this area. which you don't always get by just negotiating something with your hauler. Gives us a chance to adjust all the franchise agreements to make sure they're all uniform and consistent with the current law and legislation. Cal Recycle, who's one of our overlords in Sacramento for solid waste, has just released a full comprehensive new template of a franchise agreement that attempts to bring all the new laws into play. And while Mandy and I guess I can't speak for you, Mandy. Maybe you've stayed up and read the whole thing, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet because it just came out. It's very long, well over 100, 150 pages. These agreements can be complex. So we'll look at it and see. You know, that's one opportunity is you got a template there that we could all use that would be consistent with all the new laws and requirements. And of course, one other thing that bidding brings is an opportunity for new ideas. Whether they're new ideas or concepts from the bidders or from the public participating in that process, gives you an opportunity to sort of fine tune those agreements and meet changes in demand or service requirements. Next slide, please.
Patrick, did you want to wait to the end for questions or?
No, go right ahead. If you want to have a question, go right ahead.
So I have a couple of questions. One, when go out to bid, is it Salinas Valley Recycles is going out to bid? Is it the county that's going out to bid? Is it the city that's going out to bid? Who's going out to bid?
One or all of the above, and I'm going to get into that in a little more detail in the next slides.
Okay, and then you mentioned the regional for the 3 central cities. If a city wanted to join with them, they could do that.
Yes.
Or breakaway. Okay. I'll wait for future slides. I think.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about it. So, you know, the example could be King City could decide that they want to join with the other 3 southern cities. We did have that discussion last time around when there was extensions going on, and King decided they wanted to just go ahead and keep their current vendor because they're different vendors. And those are all good ideas. I'm not here to be critical of one direction or the other, just to give you the information on what the options might be. And so, yes, that can absolutely happen. Or all those cities could say, hey, we all want to be independent. We're going to just have our own agreement. So there's pros and cons to each of those approaches. So here's just an example of some of the basic rates that exist out there today amongst the 4. So we have 4 franchise agreements that operate in our service area. Republic Services is for Salinas. Tri-Cities Disposal is for our central cities. Waste Management has 2 separate agreements, one for the county and one for the city of King. So you can see across the board, and I'll say one thing, actually all the agreements with the exception of the county agreement are all generally the same. They were using a similar template. So the agreements, while they're not exactly the same and would need some modification to be more similar, they are generally using the same format and framework that we've used on other agreements. So in terms of the service and the requirements and the obligations, they're pretty similar. So you can see the rates are sort of all over the board. And some of this is nuance about how garbage companies bid their contracts, where they see the service levels going, and some of it's about trying to maximize revenue. Let's be honest. I mean, these are companies that are out to make a living as well, and looking at where the most customers might be, but also when they were bid originally, they were trying to be competitive and trying to win a contract. So they may be doing certain things in the way they set up their bids and their rates to support what they think is going to be the winning blend of rates and services to get that contract. So because they're very old though, and they've inflated at different levels by different contracts, and they've had adjustments through the years, you can see the rates are very different. There's actually a pretty wide swing from high to low rate at each of these different basic levels. So, you know, the residential side, you have 35 or 48 gallon trash service. That's traditional. It's what most of us probably have at home. 64 gallon is a bigger cart for garbage. And then 96 are these giant carts, which typically a very large family or maybe a duplex or something like that. Then commercial rates, these are just samples. There are dozens and dozens of rates, but these are some of the more common rates that you see most people subscribing to. So then of course, some haulers, the recycling is included in their rate. They don't charge extra for it. Some haulers provide sort of a minimum level of recycling, but if you want a lot of recycling, want to be a super recycler, you got to pay for more. And some haulers like Republic Services, all commercial recycling. And again, this is on the commercial end I'm speaking. The Republic Services, if you want to recycle, you got to pay more. So that rate there is just the garbage service. If you want recycling, you got to pay up to 50% of that garbage rate for the comparable size recycling container. So you can see the rates are pretty high. And the other difference here is that all the agencies charge a franchise fee. That franchise fee is different across the board. Waste Management in the county charges 10%. King City is 18.5%, I believe. Tri-Cities is 20%, and Republic Services in Salinas is 26%. So these aren't normalized rates because they do have a component in there that is solely decided by the jurisdiction and not by the garbage company. So again, this is sort of the challenge of wanting to look at this, is just saying, look at, you know, we can get more market-based rates, maybe get a little competitive edge going to bring rates down or at least stabilize them. That's one benefit of going out to procurement. Next slide, please. So it looks complex, but I'm going to just try to make it really simple because it really is. There are basically 4 options for bidding when you're in a regional area like this. One would be, and this is getting back to Mark's question earlier, one would be you can consolidate and bid all of our member agencies under one single agreement. That's done. There are several jurisdictions in the Bay Area that have done this, where their regional agency holds the contract, actually issues it and manages it and runs it under guidance from their respective jurisdictions. So that's one option. The second is what we would refer to as a collective bid. And that's where, and it's very similar to what the Monterey Peninsula did for the majority of their cities, not all, but excluding the city of Monterey, is they went out and they collectively bid for each of their member agencies, but they did one big procurement process. But what came out of it were individual agreements that each city had with the hauler. So they have different rates. They have maybe some boutique services are a little different. As an example, City of Carmel, they don't allow you to put your garbage carts out on the curb like the rest of us do. They have backyard service. That's much more expensive. The driver has to get out, go pull the cart from the backyard, dump it, go put it back in the backyard. That's very inefficient, but it just has to do with the way Carmel operates and wants to see their streets maintained in a clean, orderly manner. That's just their preference. So it costs a lot more money. But the benefit of the collective bid is, one, again, you may still get some benefits of economy of scale. Again, two, you have a unified agreement, so everybody's signing the same agreement with the same provisions in it. So that's the collective bid. Status quo bid, that's really just going out and doing an RFP for each individual jurisdiction by themselves. You know, King City could go out to bid, issue an RFP and just bid for their services only. And then finally, what really has been going on probably since 2010 has been just continuing to extend and modify existing agreements. So if it's not broken, don't fix it, some will say. You know, there's some benefits to that as well. It's usually a much easier process. You just negotiate what you want in the next agreement in exchange for giving them, as the county just did, giving them a significant extension, usually 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. One more click. Oh, I don't know how that got in there. Okay. So this is just, again, back to Mark's question. The authority was set up and it can provide collection services. We haven't historically done that. We've only functioned as an administrator for agreements. But if the cities wanted to, consider that, the authority, by its own joint powers agreement, is set up where it can provide those services if they are requested by a member agency or all member agencies. Next slide, please. So consolidated franchise service is the first option. So this would be one where it'd be a single authority-wide franchise agreement, uniform services. The authority, again, could act as the lead and actually hold that contract. The benefit is it reduces your procurement costs. It simplifies negotiation. Only doing one agreement. Everything's very uniform. Reduces the administrative burden on the member agencies. Typically, when you do it that way, there is an advisory committee of staff members, senior staff members from each jurisdiction that functions as the oversight body, providing a direction on administration of that agreement. So it's not just the authority running it on their own, would be done under an advisory structure. Again, creates uniformity, and the benefit of consolidated procurement is obviously get huge economies of scale, and most likely you end up getting the best possible rates under that type of structure. Next slide, please. Collective franchise agreements, same thing. You only have one procurement process, so you still have one RFP and one unified agreement, but at the end of the day, each city can decide which hauler they want, or everybody can agree on the same hauler as they did on the peninsula, and then you have to go and then negotiate individual agreements. And then under that structure, again, the agreement could stay with the jurisdiction as they all are now, or they could be, or the authority could be the holder of that agreement. So there you have an option under that scenario to do either type of administrative management. Again, uniformity. There's a potential for some economies of scale because you're, again, bidding all of the jurisdictions at one time. You may get, again, additional competitive benefits out of that and potentially better rates. Next slide, please. So status quo franchise service procurement. This is the most amount of work, but some jurisdictions may want this. They may want to maintain that independence. That means you got to do your own procurement, whether it's the authority doing it for you or we do it through consultant. It does increase your procurement costs and a lot more commitment of time to individual negotiations. Member agencies under this scenario will typically hold their own agreement. And then oversight could be, again, by the authority or could be handled in-house. It still provides uniformity because you're bidding with a uniform agreement, so you still end up with a uniform set of standards for operations. With this type of procurement, typically there's not a lot of benefit because of economies of scale, because in essence, you're just, all these companies are coming in and they're bidding just on King City, or they're bidding just on Gonzales, or they're bidding on Salinas. And so that doesn't, the economies of scale usually don't show up under that type of structure. Next slide, please. Then finally, extension of current agreements, which has been the practice for the last 10 or 15 years. You basically just negotiate extensions and hope your rates are still good and that they're balanced. But as you can see, rates will get out of balance when you go a long period of time between procurements. You do end up with some rate imbalances that become more apparent as time goes on. requires a lot more oversight. Again, either the jurisdiction overseeing it or having the authority handle it in-house, which is the current practice. But it does also mandate that each individual jurisdiction is now independently responsible for coordinating the regulatory mandates. I mean, we're always going to be here to help and do everything we can to achieve that. But the more independent you are, the more responsible the regulatory agencies hold you to. So there are some give and takes there. And the old adage again, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If you're really, a lot of jurisdictions are just very happy with their haulers and don't really want to go through this process because it is cumbersome. It does take time. But you do have a professional staff that has been through this and understands this process and can help you with that if you decide you want to participate in any one of these 4 avenues for extending or procuring your agreements going forward. Next slide. I think that's the last one. So that is Garbage Franchise Procurement 101 in a nutshell. So I'm really, at this point, this is just information, but I'd be more than happy to answer questions and absolutely want to hear feedback. If you have perspectives, opinions, because there are pros and cons to each of those 4 processes.
I can see why 5 years out is a good time to start, though.
Yes.
Yeah, herding all the cats is sometimes a challenge. But I have a couple questions, but to start off with, what's the timeline in the Peninsula franchise agreement there? Are they in line with this? And, I'm not proposing, I'm just asking if their timeline aligns with this. And also, what have we learned from their experience? Can we compare the pre and post, pre kind of, like ratepayers saw a reduction in bill, whatever that looks like, if that makes sense. So those are the 2 questions I have.
Yeah, those are good questions. So their agreement expires 5 years later. So again, all the cities except for Monterey, that agreement expires, I don't remember, Mandy, you may know, is either June or December of 2030. So it's another 5, at least another 5 to 5.5 years out. So that's always an option. And I think, I don't know if I'd said that on the last slide. Can you back up one slide, Rosie? No, I didn't put, I need to add that back into just to the last one, yeah. Yeah, I forgot to add that in, but that is another point under the extension of current franchise agreements. We could consider moving everything out 5 more years and then do a countywide procurement. So that's one option that the cities could look at, and we would definitely encourage if they want to go down this last pathway of just extending current agreements. That at least gives us the opportunity of, again, having a countywide franchise that could be administered via a much bigger committee, but could, again, be run the same way with the 2 agencies assisting. So that's one option. Well, I'm sorry, can you refresh me on your second question again?
Oh, just with the Peninsula kind of adjustment there, have we learned anything? Yeah, like, did we see rating, like yeah, old franchise agreements to the new, what was the difference? And besides the consolidation, but the cost.
Well, I think they saw a couple things. One is they were consolidating a bunch of really old agreements that were written a long time ago that really had substandard services. They were barely compliant with 939 rules in terms of, modern collection systems. They were using old crates for stacking crates for recycling, and green waste was optional. You often put your own can out, not a cart that was provided by the hauler. And so it's a little hard to say. Their rates went up, obviously, because they went from a older school system to the modern 3-cart collection system, and expanded recycling. So they did see rate adjustments, rate increases, because it was different. They were modernizing their system. In our case, we'd actually had the modern collection system in the Salinas Valley probably going back to like the early 2000s, where most everybody's next agreement or their agreement in the early 2000s were all reflective of that new service. So the changes we've seen over the years have been a lot smaller compared to what they did. So I think that's the first thing. It's hard to say whether that saved them money or not. It just brought them up to market rates for the modern collection system. You know, in talking with the staff over there, I think, you know, there were some pros and cons. I mean, obviously the collective, as we said a little earlier, you know, the collective bidding gives you some benefit. It's a little simpler procurement in the sense that you're doing one procurement for everybody. But on the backside, it's a lot more work because you are now negotiating individual agreements. So that takes a lot of commitment, either be a consultant or a combination of consultant and staff to get each of those agreements executed. But they did end up with, you know, 6 or 7 agreements that are all basically the same. There were some benefits. You know, City Marina probably has the lowest rates because they're right next to the landfill and the recycling center. You know, City of Carmel, Pacific Grove, a little farther away, they pay a little bit more. You know, so it's sort of a mixed bag, but they all do have different rates, and a lot of it is, with the exception of Carmel, a lot of it's driven by proximity and travel to the landfill. But I think all in all, that process worked. You know, everybody, you know, the collective was to maintain the autonomy at that time. District didn't really have any operating expertise. I mean, they had people that know how to do this or have done this, but the district had never ran franchise agreements for their jurisdictions. So this would have been sort of a new avenue for them. Our agency's been doing this for 20 plus years, administering franchises for some or all of our member agencies. So that's sort of the best I can give you in terms of, you know, just sort of a nutshell what they learned from it. So would they do it differently next time? I think just like us, they threw the idea out there of having a regional franchise administered very similar to what we proposed as one option. But at the end of the day, it was the cities all decided they wanted to maintain their own franchise agreements.
And the last question that I have is, has there been any talk, and I think it was mentioned briefly, but bringing it in-house and having a, you know, municipal hauler instead of a franchise? I know it's, you know, probably done more on the East Coast and other sections, but just, you know, if you've had any thoughts on it, I you know, you go either way, but yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, that would be a big undertaking. There are 2 local examples. The City of Watsonville, City of Santa Cruz, both still run municipal collections. But that's because they've always done that. So they've been doing garbage collection in both of those cities since the turn of time, I guess. I don't know if they ever ran them under contract. So it was just, it's an embedded service and embedded knowledge in the city. That's just the way they run business. You know, they do their own collection. They never bid it. So it's always possible, but it is a big undertaking. I only recall 1 or 2 cities that I've, you know, looked at or seen in the past where they've done that, where they've gone from franchised private collection and converted to municipal collection. It's usually the other way around. People start at municipal and they go, we're tired of this. We think let the big boys do it, and they, for whatever reason, economics or otherwise, they decide to turn it over. Could be risk reduction, could be cost savings. It's hard to say. You know, government can do things cheaper sometimes. Sometimes it can't. So I haven't given a lot of thought to it because it just doesn't seem like something anybody would want to do. But it's a perfectly good additional avenue. In fact, having you say that, I'm going to go ahead and add that to the slide and just put it out there, and people can contemplate it and decide if they think that's a valid idea. I think for the smaller cities, it could be doable, a little easier to do, just because it's not as complex. You get into a big city like Salinas, that's a commitment. Under the current times and challenges we have, I'm not sure how many of the cities would be up for that kind of a challenge, but it's definitely an option.
Yeah, Patrick, I was thinking the same thing. That perked my ears when you mentioned it. And I don't know, we might be surprised because there's a push now for public water and other public services. You know, community energy has now taken over our energy delivery. So you might find in the next 5 years, this is actually something we start talking about more and more as we get closer to this deadline.
Yeah, well, I would definitely, for something like that, I would definitely recommend the cities all extend their agreements a few years to give them a little planning time to sort of think through that. And no, it's very feasible. I mean, you know, by garbage trucks, you got to get drivers in, and there's a lot of companies out there that will train drivers, you know, teach them the ins and outs. You have access to the public in a way that the haulers don't have. There are definitely advantages to doing that. You know, you just have to be committed. It is a heavy lift. I'm not going to soft pedal it and say, oh yeah, go right ahead. Just go buy some trucks and throw them on the street. You'll be okay. You know, you got to deal with cart inventory. You got to deal with maintenance. You got to deal with DOT. And, you know, and there's a ton of moving parts to taking over municipal collections, but it's definitely doable. You know, just need a little professional help to give you the right guidance and make sure you get somebody that understands collection systems to help you cost out because it's a huge capital investment. I mean, a city like Salinas, I can't begin to guess off the top of my head. It'd take me a little while to figure that out, how many millions of dollars of capital you'd have to invest in between carts, bins, roll-offs, all the rolling stock, you know, collection vehicles, service vehicles. Yeah, it's a big capital investment, but if you plan it right and do it right, have the right rate structure, it'll work. One creative thing that cities could consider if they wanted to go down that pathway. I mean, I know we've done it internally at our facility when we've taken over operations, is if we're going to take something over, I've required that the operating staff provide a bid. You know, if you want to take over running the landfill, tell me how much it's going to cost you, what's your capital needs, what's your operating needs. You know, you put a full-blown pro forma together, and we'll look at that in comparison to bids from outside companies. And if you can do a better job, then you know, we can save face and talk to the board about it and say, hey, here's an option, and it looks like we can do it as well or better than a private company. This is just would be a very new area for people. So I would advise that we would spend some time studying that first. But I will add that to the slides. So thank you for that input. I hadn't really thought about that one. All right, any more questions, comments, feedback? Well, if something comes to you in the middle of the night, feel free to give me a call in the morning and share your thoughts.
Patrick.
Yes.
At today's supervisors meeting, Supervisor Phillips asked if there was some sort of discount for businesses since they had seen the largest increase in the rates. And I didn't quite get the answer at the board meeting. I wondered if you knew about that. Well,
there is no discount. Service is service. So the only way they're going to get a discount for a business is if somebody subsidizes it. Either the county puts money in or the garbage company is benevolent and gives up some of their profit. Because normally when you have discounts, like for instance, senior discounts, if you say I want to have a senior discount or a low income discount in my rates, well, the haulers will give you those in their bids or their proposals. But just be aware, everybody else is paying for it, right? It's, you know, it's nothing's real free and nothing's free in the world. And so the same thing would go here, you know, for COVID, unless the county wants to redirect some of whatever stimulus or COVID related funding they have to redirect some of that to offset the cost of refuse and recycling for impacted businesses or homeowners. I mean, that's one way they could do it, but pretty certain none of these, especially the big companies, are going to be too willing to give up a lot of profit for that. I mean, they do donate things. They do provide services. I don't want to leave everybody with the wrong opinion of these companies. They're all they can be very, very, very benevolent, but you know, long-term subsidy of a discounted rate or something is something that each elected body is going to have that discussion with their hauler to see if they're interested in coming back and talking about those things. And one of the comments today from Supervisor Phillips, because he told me about it, is, you know, we've had some long-standing concerns over the county rates that were very disproportionately imbalanced towards businesses on our side of the county. And many years ago, we had done a very elaborate analysis when the contract was awarded in 2010 that really proved out the fact that why were businesses in the Salinas Valley paying 50% more than businesses on the peninsula? The standard answer was, well, that's the bids we got. And the math is probably different than the math that was used. And so I know he raised that question today. He talked to me about it as well. He was concerned over the fact that, you know, if you're a commercial business in Salinas Valley, you're paying 50% more than the same commercial business on the peninsula. So we're going to try to have some additional conversations, but this gets back to the imbalance issue of rates, especially as the contracts get much older. There's no opportunity to fix it if you don't go back out and go through a competitive procurement.
Those are great questions and comments. I was listening intently and taking notes because, as you can see, this is an issue that we're going to be taking up, and it is complex because we're dealing with so many jurisdictions and so many bodies that will be making decisions and votes on this. So are we ready to move on to the next item, or anything else, other input on this? You know, and I should have asked also, I'm assuming we haven't had any emails come in with comments or anything from the public, have we?
No, we haven't.
Okay. All right, well, let's go to the item number 4 and the last item on the agenda, and it's 5:11 now. I'll be dropping off at 5:30. So this is the update on the Sun Street Transfer Station relocation project and the City of Salinas 1-year notice of intent to withdraw from the joint powers agreement with the Salinas Valley Solid Waste Authority. Now that's a mouthful. So I'm going to go ahead and start off, Patrick, and give an update, and then you can fill in some of the gaps, and we'll have a conversation here. As I had mentioned at the beginning of our meeting, we had been at a standstill for a little while for those reasons that I stated. And this past Friday, we had a really good meeting between the Solid Waste Authority. So it was Patrick, myself, Chris Lopez as in his role as being on the executive committee, and then obviously also in his role as supervisor. And then with City of Salinas, it was Christy Cromini's, David Fruss. Who am I missing, Patrick?
David Jacobs and Brian Fruss.
I'm sorry, David Jacobs and Brian Fruss. There we go. That I was combining 2 people. I knew I was missing someone. It was a good meeting, and I'm going to editorialize a little bit because it had been interesting as we had been having discussions and such, and there were, I'll just phrase it this way, there was some very strong opinions and thoughts from Mayor Gunter and City Manager Corpus that didn't necessarily reflect the viewpoints of all of the city council members for the city of Salinas. The tenor of our meeting on Friday was quite a bit different than some of our past meetings. And as a result, I left that meeting feeling very enthusiastic about the path that we can hopefully take. We have another meeting this coming Friday, and it looks like we're going to be establishing a regular meeting schedule. We only had an hour for our meeting on Friday, and so what I thought would be the best use of our time when we met was to kind of lay out in bullet point form the areas that we wanted to address in our meetings that we have. I'm going to go over those. I'll let Patrick fill in some of the gaps, and then there's going to be some areas that at least we can have an initial discussion on now, and get some feedback and thoughts on it as well. But I thought it would be good to start with those bullet points so you can kind of see where we're at, and they are in priority order. So the first bullet point is related to Madison Lane as a potential future permanent location for the Solid Waste Authority. So bullet point number 1 is negotiations with Republic. And that's priority 1 because there's a lot of moving parts to that, and that requires support and some nudging on behalf of City of Salinas to Republic to help in that negotiation process. I'll go through the bullet points and then we kind of elaborate on some of them. So that's the first one. First priority is negotiations with Republic. The second bullet point is potential locations for the Solid Waste Authority to find as a permanent location. My thought behind that is if for whatever reason Madison Lane does not work as a location, and or if we want to go into the CEQA process with other potential locations so that they can be evaluated, that will have other potential locations. So second priority is potential locations. Third priority is leaving Sun Street. And really we could kind of say that items number 1, 2, and 3 are really the top priorities. So we know, and we've known for a long, long time, that the Solid Waste Authority needs to leave Sun Street. That has been a priority of ours, a priority of the City of Salinas. It's just been the process and the steps getting to that point that has been a struggle. So leaving Sun Street is priority 3. Priority 4 is the City of Salinas removing their notice of intent to withdraw. And it's priority 4 because Christy Cromini's brought up the notion that in order for the Salinas City Council to be comfortable with removing that notice of intent to withdraw, we first need to address 1, 2, and 3. We have to have a plan, a collective plan for leaving Sun Street. We have to have identified locations that we go into CEQA on. All of those are I'll state it as a requirement of the City of Salinas in order for them to remove the notice of intent to withdraw. So that's priority 4. And then priority 5 is governance. The governance is how we go about voting, what the voting structure is for the Solid Waste Authority Board. And there had been a request months and months ago driven by Gunter and Corpus that we reevaluate and review governance. Governance gets tricky because we are a joint powers, we are a JPA, and with all the members of the JPA, any change to the governance would require a review, input, and positive vote by each of the member jurisdictions. So the cities in the authority service area as well as the county. So it's a pretty complex one and would take quite a bit more time. So we recognize that it's something that needs to be evaluated, but I mean, let's be realistic. Dealing with governance is complex, and what good does it do to address governance if we don't have a plan for leaving Sun Street and if we don't have a plan for a potential location? So I'm going to pause there for a second because I rattled off those priorities. Any questions on the priorities? Any clarifying
Rob,
questions
Paula,
on those priorities? Yeah.
Paula had her hand up, so I'll let her go first, but then I have a question.
Okay, go for it, Paula. And you got to unmute yourself, Paula, if you're talking.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
I'm new to all of this.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. So the thing that seemed to, over the last 4 or 5 years, hold us up in the past has always been Salinas, the city of Salinas, not agreeing to where we wanted to go with Sun Street. Is there any indication that they're more amenable to actually discussing in some realistic options, or is it going to be the same business as usual?
You phrased that so diplomatically, Paula.
Rob, let me ask my question too, because I think you're going to answer both of them at the same time.
Okay.
But priority 4, as far as withdrawing the intent to withdraw, I'm assuming that is on a temporary basis. Is that correct?
Well, the JPA. So let me answer that one first, Brett, and I'll come back to you, Paula. Rescinding that notice of intent to withdraw, that process is stated in the JPA. So the process, if a jurisdiction is going to exit, is first they have to give their notice of intent to withdraw, and then there's a process by which they can actually withdraw from the authority. So that still is on the table. And really the way I would think about that is, because that notice of intent to withdraw is on the table, that's really the mechanism that allows the city of Salinas to withdraw if they so choose to pull that trigger. So we're still under the gun. Okay. Paula, good question. I could answer it in a few ways, but I'll answer it like this. I feel like Christy is going to bring more of a collaborative approach and is more open to options. There is, so today's Tuesday. Patrick, when is your meeting? Actually, this might be a good time for you to add in. You have a meeting on Thursday, right? Tomorrow, Wednesday. This might be a good time for you to talk about your meeting, and then Paula, we'll know a lot more Friday after Patrick has his meeting tomorrow, and then we have our meeting with the city of Salinas on Friday.
Yeah, so our meeting tomorrow, part of it is really just to bring Jim Pia, who's the interim city manager now, bring him up to speed on what's going on. I've known Jim a long time. He was the interim city manager back when we started this process. So he's come back around 10 years later, and here we are again, still trying to figure out an answer. And so the meeting tomorrow is really just a small group meeting with the general manager, with Republic, myself, Jim Pia, and the public works director, Dave Jacobs. So it's not a big meeting. So some of it's to bring Jim into the discussion. Some of it, I think, is to allow a little more transparent discussion around what's going on, because I know the city is doing some things we're not aware of, but they're related to us. And I think, Jim and I want to echo what Rob said about Christie's comments are really about, let's all get at the table and actually have an open conversation about what's going on and where we're heading, and see if we can start to map out a collaborative solution. So I think, you know, knowing Jim for a long time, I sort of know that's where he comes from. Did a little different style, and I think that's he really wanted. You know, I reached out to Jim, and then he reached back and said, "Hey, let's get the other 2 or 3 people at the table, and let's just sort of figure out where we're at and see what we need to do to go forward." Because right now, the challenges we have is, you know, Republic has told us pretty clearly they have no intent to sell us a piece of Madison Lane. They may be interested in a long-term lease, build to suit for things that we might need at the property. But they're in the process of doing their own needs assessment, because Madison Lane is, in my opinion, probably going to become a regional hub for further growth of the company. Things like franchises coming up in 5 years. They've actually moved their regional operations center to Salinas from Fresno. So that's a tell that, you know, they have something bigger in mind. So I think their needs assessment is about them looking at what do they really need to, you know, for their current operations as well as, you know, future potential. So until that's done, we're sort of in a holding pattern about whether they would be willing to at least do a long-term lease and build to suit things that we might need, like offices. We're going to need to relocate our offices in the next year or so. And maybe even without the transfer station have been relocated, because the buildings are for sale. So there's a few things, kind of moving parts, that we're all stuck waiting for Republic. And I think Christy has reflected on that. Jim has reflected that. Let's have some conversation here.
Can I ask one more quick question?
Yeah, go right ahead. That's all I have.
Yeah. Is there any indication that Sala Road might go back on the table?
Well,
you want me to answer this, Patrick?
Sure.
I wish, Paula, because I think that would be a good location. I think the reality is, unfortunately, politically, I don't think it will happen, unfortunately. It would take some pretty strong nudging of the Board of Supervisors for them to support that. That is my political answer. Patrick would probably answer it differently, because he can be more sensitive, or has to be more sensitive. I don't know. But
no, I think you're right on. As good as it may be, and the fact that it's sort of gone in and out of contract for projects, we understand there may be a project on there now. Last I heard, it was going to be at least a part of it was going to be an extension of the self-store facility that's on the other side of the off-ramp, the overcrossing. I think our operation would be a better use of that site than just making more U-store facilities. But I haven't heard any new news on it, and the for sale sign's still there, and I haven't seen any permits coming forward for anything on it. So I think it's would be a pretty difficult, heavy lift, because people just have a stigma. You know, I tried to show the board and elected officials in some of the cities, you know, what a modern transfer station, and many of you that were on the advisory committee have seen that presentation, you know, that modern transfer stations are actually a huge infrastructure asset for communities. And if they're done right, and their architectural considerations are placed into that design, they really can be attractive facilities.
Yeah.
You know? And Sun Street is not an example of what you want to build, okay? And I think, unfortunately, that's been the disconnect that we've been trying to break, is that people keep looking at Sun Street, and we hear things that are sort of negative, like, you know, dump in the middle of the city. Absolutely, that was never intended to be a permanent facility. That was a transitional facility, a transition from that was supposed to be there for a couple of years while we designed and built the permanent facility.
So Rob, on your point of the political side of it, from my time when I was up in Salinas, that whole area around Sala Road is supposed to be their gateway to the city. And I know that we have a tank up in that area, and they really wanted us to hide it with a bunch of trees and stuff like that. So I think I understand your side of the whole political thing.
Yes. But I totally get your comment. What we need to do, Patrick, is show everyone on the committee again just a couple of pictures from the potential of how it could look, because you'll see, Mark, the way.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I agree. I remember the pictures. I think it's going to look great. It goes back to what Patrick said. It's the stigma
Yeah.
of it being that in the gateway to the city is, I'm not saying the actual in reality, I'm saying the stigma at the gate. And that's where I think the political.
And it's so silly because the way the building looks, it looks like a nice industrial building. You can't even tell, because everything it's a large enclosed building and stuff. So I need to drop off now. I apologize. I got to get to my special city council meeting. But you can see where, and you guys, I want you to have more of a discussion and give any feedback you want. Our next meeting is going to be really neat because Patrick will have had his meeting. Tomorrow we will have had our meeting with the city of Salinas on Friday, and we're going to know a whole lot more to your question, Paula, and we'll have some good insights. So I'm excited. So apologize. I'm going to drop off. Y'all take care, and I will see you real soon.
Take care, Rob.
See you later, Rob.
Rod.
So Patrick, on this, continuing this conversation, whatever happened to work? I thought there's one up in Salinas that they were talking about Work Street.
Well, I'll tell you, I think I don't have an answer for you. I have raised that. We had the prior public works director, and Mr. Corpus unfortunately just killed that project. That was the project. And we came out of the recession ready to go. We were going to do property exchanges. Their developer for the marketplace, was offering to do design build for us to, help us relocate. And
Well, can we bring it back to life?
well, the short answer that I got was the asphalt. They didn't want to relocate the asphalt plant down to the quarry north of Gonzales, even though they had all the permits in place to relocate it. And that batch plant was on a year-to-year lease. And at the end of the day, we were told by the public works director basically that, that plant is too important to Salinas. I don't want my guys having to drive down to Gonzales to get asphalt for road repair. And they saw.
But there's a lot of empty land over there, are we still, even with the empty land that's there, you still need that property?
Well, I'll tell you, we made a proposal, an alternate proposal to cohabitate with the batch plant and use the piece of land that's between the batch plant and the wreck ditch. Mm-hmm. And also to acquire the parcel that is just to the north of the batch plant. There's a small parcel there.
Between the hotel?
No. The hotel's much farther down the street. It's between the old tallow plant and the batch plant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that would allow us to have an ingress and egress right off of Work Street. But now that they've done the LB Drive extension, you could potentially ingress and egress on LB Drive. So the short version is the combination, the sort of L-shaped combination of the parcel that's parallel with the highway, and then the other parcel that runs up to Work Street. We had design for that would make it work. And when we tried to raise that with the city a couple of years ago, going back and looking at it, we were told that second parcel that's actually fronts Work Street had been tentatively committed to cannabis. So that only left that smaller parcel that's down along the wreck ditch in frontage to the highway. And that is borderline too small. There's a pump station there for the wastewater conveyance system. And the city, unfortunately, they've been using that for a couple of decades as a spoils yard. So if you've driven by there, you see the big piles of wood chips and ground asphalt and concrete and stuff that they've taken out of public works projects. they would have to relocate all that as well. So there's just, every time I've raised it, I've gotten a pushback. But I do intend to raise it tomorrow in our meeting. So it is an alternate site. We want to go back, as we try to do this reset with the city, we're going to go back and try to have a conversation about every single site that we have looked at, some of which have had some preliminary CEQA work done on them. They've had fatal flaw studies done on them. We've done a lot of work on each of the sites. The city has supported some of those sites and then changed their mind later. And even going all the way back and looking at sites that were studied in our 2002 EIR, because that EIR was part of the process very early on of identifying possible sites in and around Salinas. So my intent is when we get a little farther along in the next month or so, is to actually compile every single site we've looked at and sit down with the city staff and just go through them one at a time. Put them on a map and say, okay, yes or no. Tell me why you don't want to do it. Let's look at the pros and cons, and sort of do an internal siting study. Just something very simple, like why shouldn't we look at this site? What are the constraints? What are the concerns?
I assume in your conversation tomorrow, you're gonna show some more show the renderings again of the building and remind them of how nice it will look.
Well, these guys all know how they look. I think this group, very small group, we're going to have a meeting with tomorrow. I don't need to convince them that a facility can be built right. I think tomorrow's meeting is more about just getting on the same page about how to move forward, because this will be Jim's first reintroduction into solid waste, where he's gotten involved with this side of the city business in 10 years. So it's going to be sort of him, bringing him up to speed, getting him to hear from the three parties in the room as to, where things are at. And the city's been doing a study for like 2 years and it hasn't been released yet. And we've been asking for help on that. Where is it? Well, as we find out, there was the public services made them sign an NDA, so they can't talk about it. So, like you're doing a study about the authority, and you sign an NDA with a private garbage company, so that we can't be at the table and talk now. And that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a real problem for me, because in garbage negotiations 101, that's like the first rule: don't sign NDAs.
Patrick, I asked this question 6 months ago, I think, and I'm just wondering if the answer has changed. For a transfer station like that for Salinas, how far south becomes economically unfeasible?
Well, for the most part, it's actually safety unreasonable. And I'll tell you why, because we did look at properties south. We looked at the Eckhart Seed Building, and that was perfect, ready-made building. We could have moved right into that thing. It didn't need anything. Had all. But
is it about like how long drivers are on the road and stuff? Like what are the safety?
It's the safety issues of traffic crossing the highway. As you know, there's those turn pockets on 101 and people have to cross oncoming traffic. That is really dangerous. There's a lot of accidents in all those pockets. And so I know Chris Lopez has been really championing to do the same kind of safety improvements on 101 south of Salinas as they did 101 north, right? Having fixed overcrosses. There's been discussion about extending a frontage road from Abbott Street.
Yeah.
Up there to connect to that, so that there's, you don't even have to get on the freeway. You can go up Abbott Street or get off on Abbott. But those are years away. I mean, we know those they're just having the community discussion now in the last year and a half. And, securing funding and designing and all that stuff, years and years. It could be a 10-year project. It's hard to say, but.
Yeah, all you have to do is read Chris's Facebook page and you know all that stuff. So
he and I talked about It's a
I didn't know if there were a limit on how long you could have a driver on the road, or for the haulers. And
I'm going to add to what Brett's saying. Instead of the
Yeah.
safety south of King City or south of Salinas, can't you go further than that to where there's off ramps? Like how
Well,
far south does it become?
then we're almost to the landfill. So
yeah, that was right. That was my question.
and then we have issues with Gonzales and all the concentration of self-haul traffic down there. We start running 300 more cars a day, or even if it's only half of them, the other half goes.
Patrick,
Yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I think I brought this up before, was what is the city going to look like without the convenience of Sun Street location? So many people utilize the location, and where are they going to take their trash if it's not easy to get rid of? So instead of showing them how beautiful this can look, what is the city going to look like without that? I think more and more people are going to start to dump illegally if they don't have that option.
If Salinas was a much smaller city, I probably would, you'd have to have that discussion about the economy of scale, but it's too big a city not to have these kind of services located in reasonable proximity to the city. I mean, that just happens everywhere. You see these types of facilities located. They can go to Marina, that's great, but City Marina has expressed in the past several times they're not interested in having all that traffic through the city, because people are going to drive through. Some of them are going to drive through Marina. Some are going to drive the back roads through the farmlands, and you're going to see a huge increase in litter and illegal dumping. Or they have to take the long route and drive through Castroville, and that is a very congested route, especially during the day in the peak growing season. It's just the reality, and so that sounds good. Or they can choose, if they're in the southern part of Salinas or western, they can choose to drive down to Gonzales. So I mean, the self-haul services, yeah, sure, you can shut everything down, and people figure out where they have to go, but there's going to be a percent of them that are going to do the wrong thing. There's been a transfer station in Salinas for 40, 50 years, and to all of a sudden not have one. And Madison Lane has its own challenges. The only way in and out of Madison Lane today is through a residential neighborhood. And they're not going to, they're tolerant of the garbage company because they've been there a long time. But when you start adding another 300-400 cars a day of self-haulers, people that aren't contractually bound to do the right thing, like the garbage companies are, we can make them do the right thing. I can't make the guy in the pickup cover his load or put things in the right way. And litter and other impacts come with that. So there's a discussion about an alternate entrance off of Rossi or off of Davis, what they call the Rossi extension, and running that across the meadow and connecting to Baranda Road. That's all good and fine, but we've now got a 700-bed farm worker facility at the end of Madison Lane in a brand new, I think it's 1,200 bed unit going in where that Rossi Road extension would start. So, again, we're sort of that operation is sort of starting to get boxed in with development and housing. So, is that going to be a problem in the future? It could be. That's what happens. People buy houses near airports and then they complain about the airport. Well, people are going to build houses near a high volume transfer station with a lot of traffic, and sooner or later that may become an issue. So we have to be sort of cautious about where we site these things to make sure that they're going to have the least long-term impact. Madison's just beautiful because it's already there. It just needs a lot of work because it is very, very run down. Millions of dollars of improvement to bring it up to what I would say, reasonable standards. And we've offered to put our share of money into that. But we will have to go through CEQA to do that kind of an expansion there. And that's when we'll find out whether the community is going to be okay with the expanded and increased use of that facility. So that's why I'm just a big proponent of let's keep other cards on the table. Let's not put everything in that basket just in case. Because if it works, then it's ready-made. If it doesn't work, or if there's a lot of community opposition, then we want to have alternatives. Caesar?
Yeah, and it's definitely a changing landscape in the city of Salinas. Ray is going to be out like 8 days from now, or there's an election for a new mayor right around the block. Gloria de la Rosa. But Gloria de la Rosa is stepping off the council, and she's your vice president, and so it's definitely a changing landscape. I think the changeover to a new city manager is going to be sooner than later, most likely. I just met with the consultant this week that's doing the vetting, the search firm or whatever they want to call themselves. So it's definitely a changing landscape. I know the issue of the Sun Street transfer station has been a political question, even with the candidates that got interviewed for mayor and city council. So it's definitely a hot potato issue in regards to economic development. Where it's going to go besides Sun Street, that's the $1 million question. I think, making sure that it's accessible to residents is definitely a major concern by at least the public works employees. But residents, are definitely have many thoughts on it. We've done some focus groups on them. So it's just, the only advice I have, it's a changing landscape. We'll see what happens in the next, 90 days, because it's definitely going to be a different city politically, just on who has power, just because there's multiple council people also stepping off, and some people are most likely going to lose.
Fingers that we'll have a good reset and have some new visions at the table that can help us kind of get this done. Because it's not, I can tell you, and Erica can attest to this because she put them together. I've got 6 4-inch binders that reflect all of our work in looking at new sites for Sun Street, just for Sun Street searches and efforts. And it's not for lack of us trying, but we just need to have, we had a very collaborative city administration when we were going to go to work streak. And then, they had a little administrative upheaval, a change of city manager, the recession hit, things got put on hold. And when we reconvened and started to want to go forward and finish it, there was a complete new thought process. And we have the same thing coming at us right now, a very substantial political change that hopefully it'll be a positive change. Thoughts. Yeah.
No, that's the hope. Having been involved in this issue since Ana Caballero all the way through now the interim mayor, it's been an interesting 10 plus years, or longer than that. I don't even know. I'm too old to remember, but yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I've been at this for 12 years. I walked into, oh, by the way, you can't stay at Sun Street, we're leaving. That was one of the first things that hit me 2 months after I started. It was like, oh, the general manager didn't tell me when I took the job. The prior one didn't say, oh, by the way, you're not going to build a new transfer station here. You're going to have to find another place. So I've been at this for 12 plus years, and I've got. I have a rotating CEQA consultant that just stays on. They've even changed names twice since we've had them. That's how long they've been on retainer to start environmental review as soon as we agree on the next site. So we're ready to roll, but we just need to get, hopefully with Jim and Christy at the helm in the interim, we can get on the right track. That's our hope. Is just get on the right track so that the next political body that comes in will just pick up, and say, okay, let's just keep going. We won't have another restart. So we're looking at this as just an interim redirection that hopefully will carry over to the new council and new administration. But I appreciate your feedback, Caesar, and your history. You know more than I do. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments, feedback. This will be an ongoing topic. You know, there is going to be some things coming. Hopefully, once we get back on track, that we're going to be looking for some significant input from the advisory committee that we can pass on to the board in terms of how we move this ball down the road. And of course, we've got all the organics diversion mandates that I think we're well positioned to comply with, but there's a lot of work involved. And then maybe we'll see what happens with the garbage franchise, but I think there's a definite role for the advisory committee on that to help provide some guidance and input to the board and the respective city councils on you know, best practices, next steps, and what people want to see in their franchise service provider, because that typically is one of the top 1 to 3 contracts any municipal agency will sign will be their garbage franchise. It has the most value in terms of revenue, and it has the most value in terms of franchising fees. So that's a big push for cities, and it's coming. We're starting the conversation. So does anybody have any parting thoughts? I'll pass on what I heard from y'all.
Good luck tomorrow.
What's that?
Good luck tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a casual thing to just sort of, you know, put all the key players in one room and just talk for a few minutes and figure out where we're at. I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of revelation tomorrow. There might be.
Not revelation, but it'll be an interesting start to the process.
Yeah, I mean, my job tomorrow is going to be more just to listen. Which I know you guys probably don't believe that I can actually just be quiet, but I can be a good listener when it's important. So I intend to just sort of listen and find out what, you know, what their goals are and what their objectives are, and see how we can blend those together with ours. All right, folks. Well, hearing nothing else, I think that is ready to adjourn the meeting, unless anybody in the committee has any other topics, comments, requests from us for items that aren't on the agenda. Do you have any parting thoughts?
I have a question about how long before we meet again, do you think?
It could be 1 month, it could be 2. But let Rob and I get through our 2 meetings this week. And if it looks like there's some substantial progress that's going to be, that we're going to want to get your input on, it might be a month, but I think at this point our plan is like every other month for these meetings. But there may be times when we are meeting monthly, when we have some, you know, substantial work product that we're trying to run through you for comment and input. So Eric or I will let you all know next week if we're planning on having the next meeting in November or early December.
Good to see
Thank you.